Thank you.
Well said.
I call me Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.
5 minutes.
It's a pleasure to honorise and speak in the appropriations debate. Mr Speaker, New Zealanders are voting with their feet. Many New Zealanders are coming back home because New Zealand is a fantastic place to live in. But what we shouldn't lose focus on, Mr Speaker, is thousands of young Kiwis every year continue to go overseas on that great Kiwi tradition, the OE. Fantastic for our young Kiwis. They go overseas, London, Europe, further afield, and they expand their worldview. And all these young Kiwis, Mr Speaker, they'll travel a range of countries around the world, and they pretty quickly realise that in a globalised world, countries choose to be competitive, and if they're competitive, they improve the well-being of their people and they protect the environment, or countries choose not to be competitive. It's as stark as that, Mr Speaker. It's a choice. And it's great to live in a country that has a competitive economy, engaging in a globalised world, that's improving the well-being of our people and protecting our environment. Mr Speaker, as Deputy Chair of the Social Services Select Committee, I just wanted to focus briefly on the announcement of $652 million into social investment. There will be many economic boffins trying to explain social investment as allocative efficiency, where you cut up the pie to get good returns. But the people on the street in my electorate, Mr Speaker, in Waimakariri, know social investment is about spending money wisely and getting the best bang for your buck. And that's exactly what this government is doing, Mr Speaker. In our welfare manifesto, we set out that we're going to reduce welfare dependency by 25% and reduce the future liability of welfare dependency to the New Zealand taxpayer by $13 billion. And what we're going to do in this budget, Mr Speaker, around social investment, we've got $61 million that goes directly into expanding our youth services. That's working with our vulnerable young people, getting them into education, employment and training. Because we know that when you look at people that go on the benefit, 70% of long-term beneficiaries go on the benefit before the age of 20. For those young people who go on by the age of 18 or 19, their average time they spend on the benefit is 13 years, Mr Speaker. But what we do know, for those young people that get off the benefit, 70% of them do so in the first 6 months of getting on the job seeker allowance. So we know we've got a 6-month window of opportunity. And that's why the $61 million investment will be supporting vulnerable young people to get into education, to get into employment and to get into training, Mr Speaker. Because the focus of our youth services is not only to reduce their risk of long-term dependence on the welfare system, it's to improve their social outcomes. Many of the young people in youth services have children of their own, and it's also to ensure that they get NCA level 2 to go on and be productive members of New Zealand, Mr Speaker. Because when you talk about the $61 million, it'll be intensive and active wraparound services. These young people have complex and challenging needs, and we need to make sure they get the wraparound services that they need. When you look at this cohort of young people, 38% have been victims of domestic violence, 76% have been victims of emotional neglect, 5% homeless, 5% victims of sexual abuse, and pretty much all of them have engaged from the mainstream education system, Mr Speaker. And that's why the $61 million of social investment into our vulnerable young people will get them into education, employment and training. We know this works, Mr Speaker. Research shows $1 invested into our youth services reduces future liability of $2.53. That's smart investment, that's a smart budget, and I commend the budget to the House, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker. Alistair Scott.